I just noticed some of the articles that the Lehi newspaper covered about your involvement in the city council, and I thought it was really refreshing.
Defending Utah covers the stories others are just too often afraid to touch.
They don't nibble around the edges when it comes to pointing out threats to our liberty. They're not afraid to name names and call out organizations.
This is Defending Utah Radio. Defending Utah. Think right and wrong, not right and left. Join Defending Utah because if you're not already on a government watch list, you should be.
Hey, welcome back to another edition of Defending Utah Television. I'm Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. And I'm really excited to have join me today. We have Katie Koivisto from the Lehi City Council. And so I appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So just watching a lot of the different city councils out there, I've been seeing some articles pop up in Lehi, and you're new to the Lehi City Council, correct? You just got sworn in January, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And people that have been watching our Facebook page saw that we were involved. We were at the Sandy City Council meeting last week, or earlier this week, as the time of the recording. I just noticed some of the articles that the Lehi newspaper covered about your involvement in the city council, and I thought it was really refreshing. Now, looking at your page, I don't know how much we might agree on different things, but that's kind of was, we think right and wrong, not right and left.
Right.
I liked what you were doing, that you were willing to stand up, and that's what we wanted to talk about. Before we get into that, I want to kind of give folks a little bit of background on you. Like, what was your, before you ran for city council, what were some maybe things that guided you to be in that direction? Maybe what are some of your political philosophies, that kind of stuff?
Sure, absolutely. So just a little bit of background history about myself. I am originally from Kansas. I'm from a little town called Gardner, Kansas. My husband is from Finland, so that's why I have a very unique last name.
Mm-hmm.
We met at BYU, Idaho in Rexburg about 14 years ago. And we were kind of the oddballs out here in Utah. We're expats, as I'd like to call it. Because I'm from Kansas, my husband's from Finland. We don't have any roots here in Utah, but because of a job transfer that my husband had about 5-6 years ago, we ended up here in Lehi, and we've loved it. It's been a great opportunity for our family, and it's been Lehi's been really great for us, and it's great. But how I got into city council was kind of I want to say it was a spur of the moment thing, but I think the seed was planted a while back. Mm-hmm. It started with, I had gotten involved with our HOA. We had lived in a neighborhood called Point Meadows neighborhood here in Lehi. And while we were there, we had purchased our house right after the recession, a couple of years after the recession had hit. And so our townhomes at the time, similar to a lot of homes that were in the area, were kind of a little bit disheveled because they had lost jobs and lost their homes and that. And so it just needed a little bit of love and TLC. And so I stepped up to the plate and I ran, I guess you'd call it, ran for the HOA presidency. And I just worked with my awesome neighbors to help beautify the area, I guess, and try to get things, balance a budget with our HOA, with the finances and that, and get things in order where they needed to be. And so once I started to do that, there were some things that started to affect our HOA that were outside of the HOA. So it had to deal with the city. And so I started going to city council meetings, wanting to get a little bit more involved and see, okay, well, what are things that I can do to help with the city to be able to help my neighborhood and my area? It started really small. And there were some things some opinions, I guess, that were voiced in city council meetings that didn't necessarily sit well with me. And I would come home and I'd have those discussions with my husband, and we would actually, we're a house divided. We would debate back and forth between the two. And there were things I would just get really worked up about. And my husband said, Katie, if you want to see change, the only way you're going to see it is if you're on that side doing something about it. And I told him I would never run for city council. Like, absolutely not. There's no way you could get me to do that. But I am of the faith, the LDS faith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And during one of the general conferences that were given, there was a quote that was given by Elder Ballard, and he had said that they need more men and women that are to participate in politics. And so that was kind of where the seed was planted. And a couple of years later, my husband came home from work one day and he said, there's an opportunity for the city officials are going to be up for re-election. I think you should do it. I told him no. And then after a couple of weeks, I just really thought about it, and I'm a religious person. I really prayed about it, and I felt like I should do it. And so I did. I didn't think I was going to win. I didn't think I was going to be where I am. And here I am. So what are some of your, I guess, where do you base your political philosophies on? Are there some principles, or some people that might be on this, you would say, oh yeah, that person's writings are something that I am in line with? Or, what are some of the things that, especially on city council, that you base your policies on or your principles on? I really like, I have two presidents that I really like. One of them's Abraham Lincoln and the other one's John F. Kennedy. And those are kind of polar opposites when you think about it. But what I admire about your show is it's not left and right, it's right and wrong. And there's one thing that that Kennedy had said that really has always stuck with me. And it was ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And so my whole philosophy, I guess, is I want to make sure that people's voices are heard at the end of the day. And I kind of root for the underdog, I guess, at the end of the day. I want to make sure that things are done fairly. I'm still in the process. I'm not a political figure by any means. I was a person that ran for city council. And I get it a lot where people ask me, like, do you agree more with the left or do you agree more with the right? I'm still trying to figure out my own political philosophies. Mm-hmm. I just feel like we should do what's right, but that's where the gray area comes in. What is right? What's the definition of right? And so I'm still in the process of figuring those things out, but I just want to make sure that if we've got residents that are coming in and they're voicing their opinions, their opinions should matter and merit just as much weight as someone else, in my opinion. But that's kind of where I am right now.
Okay, cool. So what do you think about what, these things you talked about, how you kind of got frustrated with some of the things that were going on. And so this leads you to running for office. What about your campaign do you think resonated with enough residents that got you past the primary and into the top
I know.
three?
Without a doubt, it was probably high density. That was the biggest thing I said on my campaign. I am an appraiser by trade. And so I know how zoning works. I know how value works in regards to properties. And I think that resonated the most was wanting to, what I put out there was I want to put a cap on high density housing until the infrastructure of Lehi is built out. And I think that resonated a lot with residents is realizing that we do have traffic issues here and we don't have the necessities for all the residents that are coming into Lehi. So I think that's probably the number one thing that really caught residents' attention was that philosophy, I guess.
Gotcha. And I think that would be something that resonates with us as well. As high density housing does a lot to change a culture of a city, and it changes also the idea of property rights. If you're sharing one building with 100 other people, where's your property rights? And so when we have these communities that are based on these principles, and we start to lose that because of this culture change, and when nobody has their own property to have property rights for, it can really change a community to be something completely different than what it was when people, they liked it. That's why they wanted to move there. And then all of a sudden it's something different.
It's definitely a new kind of change that's happening for Western culture. My husband and I, we lived in Finland for 3 years. When we were first married, and we had the opportunity to see firsthand the pros and the cons of high density in Europe. And I will say there's a lot, for me personally, there's actually a lot more pros than there are cons when it comes to high density. But a lot of, I personally feel, this is my opinion, a lot of things that Western culture is trying to do, they're trying to mimic this idea, but they're looking at the tip of the iceberg and not the whole iceberg itself. And there's a lot of things that have to be put into place before you can do something like that. And that's something that Western culture really has to to learn to do, and they're just not quite grasping that, in my opinion. Some cities have, some cities haven't, and I don't think Lehi's quite there yet. So,
what's something that we've noticed, and it's really attractive to a lot of cities because it's sold to them as a way to be able to increase tax revenue. You have 100 units on the same place as one house would normally be on. You're going to be able to collect a lot more taxes.
Right. And on the flip side of that, you also, a lot of residents don't take into consideration that there's also impacts. We do collect impact fees that come with each of these homes that are coming in, and we do get property taxes from it, like you said. But what's the impact? How is it affecting our water? How is it affecting our sewer?
Right.
How is it affecting the streets and the roads? And I think those things are a little bit more looked over because the shiny idea of having these taxes
money coming in. Yep.
It seems a lot more appealing than what the impact is.
Right. So there was a couple articles that really caught my attention. Was this first one from the Lehi Free Press. It's first city council meeting of 2020. Koivisto off to an obstinate start. I just love the headlines. And then the next one was just last week. City council ratifies the Ivory Johnson development. Koivisto calls calls deal shady. And so I thought that was, it's interesting. That's why those two really stuck out to me as, hey, I've got to go talk to her. She's willing to not just go along with the rest of everybody else. She's gonna, call it out and not be afraid to just say, hey, these things look shady. Let's see what's going on.
Well, there was a couple of things that stood out to me with both those articles. The first one was the fact that they used the word obstinate. I don't like playing the female card because in my mind, I feel like we should get the best elected officials, whether they're a man or a woman. I guarantee, though, had it been a man that had said the things that I had said, obstinate wouldn't have been the word that they used. They would have maybe used strong or off to a strong start, and for me, when I think of obstinate, I think of, difficult to work with. And I just don't feel like that's right to have that kind of a label put on anyone, whether you're a man or a woman, we can agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, I just don't think that that's productive by any means. And then with the other article, I think the thing that really struck me, that article came out and I was actually excited because I thought, okay, people are going to read this. They're going to know what's going on within the city. And then social media kind of attacked it. And most of the comments that I read from this article revolved around putting labels on me, which is fine. I don't mind that. I'm not in this. What people say or think about me is honestly none of my business at the end of the day.
Sure.
But distractions are such a strong force. And when this article came out, I thought people are going to read this, they're going to see and understand. And instead, the distraction was put on me, and the distraction was put on what I had said and how difficult I had been, or that. And
attacking the messenger instead of the message.
Right, exactly. And I just thought, that's so sad. Like, can we not focus on the fact that we had the city help out with a deal that increased a property land value of $1 million an acre, which is astronomical, but no one mentioned any part of that whatsoever. So that was kind of disheartening to hear, or see.
So what made you want to use that? I mean, that's a pretty strong word, and I'm not saying it's wrong. What made you feel that it was shady?
I felt that it was shady because of the way that it was handled. A lot before this deal had been put into effect months before I had been put into office, and I had tried to.
But it was something you were following beforehand.
Something I was following beforehand. I didn't get all the details of the deal until after I was in office. And that's why I felt it was really shady, was because there was so much secrecy behind it, when I felt like, why not be transparent and say, we want to get rid of a mink farm, and we have an opportunity where Ivory's going to come in and purchase the land, and the city's going to increase density to do it. Simple, right? But there was so much hush about it. There was no one talked about the amount of money that Ivory was purchasing it for. And I felt like that was really shady, because once it's purchased, it's public knowledge how much they purchase it for. So why not share that beforehand, that you're paying $5 million for 5 acres of land? And the Lehi Free Press didn't even know that. They didn't have access to that information.
$5 million for 5 acres. That just seems, how are they benefiting with that? I mean, that's insane.
It is insane. And the number one rule that we have is in our appraisals is land is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it.
Right.
And so when you have someone that's coming in, if they can't make a profit off of that land themselves, if that's their goal, they shouldn't purchase it at all.
Obviously.
Exactly. And so it is an astronomical amount. And I think the city also realized that as well. When I say the city, it's interesting because I am part of the city now. I want to say past officials, or officials from last year also knew about that, and I wasn't aware.
Why would they be willing to pay that much for it? How are they going to make their money back?
So how it's going to work is Ivory purchased the land, and then they increased density in 2 other areas of Lehi, and other developments that they had so that they can recoup their losses, as they were saying. And how Lehi is benefiting from it is Ivory, because they're purchasing the Mink Farm, they're going to be able to turn on lights that are across the street because the minks they were on protected land, and there were certain things that you could not do, or certain things that couldn't be done around the Mink Farm. And so they were able to turn on the lights. They were able to widen the road that was there. And so the city thought that this was a good deal for them because they were going to be able to benefit the residents by getting rid of this Mink Farm. And so
was the Mink Farm pushed out, or did they finally just say, whatever, we're leaving?
I feel that they were bullied out, and that's my personal opinion. When I spoke to Mr. Johnson, he owned the farm. It was the Johnson Mink Farm. Mm-hmm. And when I personally spoke with him on the phone, because I wanted to get both sides of the story, it takes 2 to tango type of a situation.
Yeah.
And what he had said is, he said that his farm had been there since the beginning of Lehi, 40 years, like that he had started this mink farm. And when developers came in and started purchasing the land around it, he would go to city council meetings and say, hey, you have to be aware, I've got a mink farm here. These are nocturnal animals. We can't have lights that are glaring in on them. We have to have certain, when it's mating season, you can't have certain sounds that are going on. Like, this is my livelihood. And at that time, the city just bulldozed over him. And I can say that because at the Planning Commission in December, the very last Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission, one of the commission members, apologized to the Johnsons and said, you know what, I'm sorry for the way that we treated you these past years in handling the mink farm. And that's on record. So that's not hearsay. That's on the record. Yeah. And so they kind of bullied them out, and the developers came in, they developed, and they built these homes. And the Johnsons,
people would complain about the smell as if like they didn't know it was there beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. They would come in and they would say, wait a second, and they would try, the residents that were coming in. I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't have any mercy, or I don't want to say mercy, but sympathy for them by any means, because you're buying next to a mink farm. Like, you should know that they're there, And there's most residents, I will say, most residents were like, we were fine with the mink farm there. Like, we knew it smelled, we knew what we were doing, Yeah. And so there are some very loud voices that eventually bullied them out. And the city felt some pressure from the residents and from the Johnsons, and the residents are saying, get rid of the mink farm. The Johnsons are saying, we were here first. We have the agricultural rights to be able to be doing what we're doing on our land. It's protected. And so the city felt some pressure. So they tried to work a deal out with the Johnsons and say, hey, what if we purchased your land and we purchased your property? And the Johnsons decided to put a price point on what he thought his farm was worth, which is absolutely fine. You can price point your property for whatever you want, At the end of the day, it's whatever the price comes back, So he price pointed it, and the city said, well, there's no way we're going to pay $5 million for this piece of land. And so the city did what they thought was a good deal, and they reached out to a developer and they said, hey, would you be willing to purchase this land? And the developer at the time, they had wanted to increase density in other areas of Lehi, and the city had told them no already. But they kind of did. That's where I feel like the shady part comes in as well, is they said, hey, you know what? We do want to increase density. We'll buy this if you're willing to do that, And
wow. It seems like at least past leaders in Lehi, I don't know, pretty much do whatever the developers say. There's high density. All the new developments are all high density. It just seems like Ivory Homes or other developers have a undue influence on the city council.
One thing that I really pushed when I was running, that I don't think a lot of people were aware of, and I think I should have pushed it even harder, was I encouraged residents to look at who was donating to city council members' campaigns, and not just that year, but prior years as well. Most of them received donations from developers. And I would call out any one of them and I'd say, hey, but I didn't receive one donation from one developer. That doesn't mean they didn't reach out to me. I'm in the appraisal business. I know these developers. They did reach out to me and ask, and I chose not to, because I know you're playing with fire at that point, because there's an expectation, whether you want to agree to it or not, there is an expectation that when you have donations that are come to you, you feel that pressure to appease those people and to make sure you follow through with promises that you've made. And so that was one thing that I didn't do, is I didn't take developer donations, and I encourage residents to see who are their donors that are coming in,
And we see that all over the valley. We see problems in Harriman. You see problems up in, Cottonwood Heights, or no, in Holiday right now. They've got big issues going on there. And so it seems like it's all over the state. You have these developers that are having an undue influence on elected officials. Right. And so it makes a lot of citizens feel like, hey, they don't have a say. The city's just going to do either because of donations or just because of the influence that they might have. Right. And so it seemed like during your campaign, I saw some of the criticism was, labeled against you, that during the campaign, you just, that you were just so anti high density housing and whatnot. And it's kind of interesting to hear the clarification now. But it seemed like it was not just about high density housing, but it was about undue influence of people that, weren't citizens.
Exactly. And I think, and you hit the nail on the head with that one. I think that's the biggest pressure point that I feel right now is we've got developers that are coming in that are pushing this, and they don't even live in Lehi. It doesn't affect them, and it's not going to affect them. Or if it does affect them, it's not to any kind of level that it does the residents here. And there are times where I feel like sometimes I'm going crazy, because I think maybe what I'm saying is wrong, like maybe the developer is right. And I have to come home and kind of get that level headed from my friends and from my husband and say, no, okay, like this seems really wrong. Like we shouldn't be doing this. We should really be listening to what the residents are wanting. And on the flip side of that, there's also the debate question of, well, you've got these homeowners who come in and their developers you've got someone who's got a couple acres of land. They come to the city and they want to sell their land to a developer. One thing that the developers are doing is they're asking these residents to change the zoning before the developer purchases the land, because they want to make sure that they can do what they want to do on that land. Mm-hmm. And as an owner, that resident can choose. They have their property rights to choose what they want to do with the land. And if they want to request a zone change, and if it makes feasible sense, then they have every right to do that. And that's where it comes in kind of tricky, because you've got these situations where, similar to the most recent city council meeting that we had, you've got an area that has a large amount of low density that's completely surrounding a little island that a developer wants to put high density on. And you've got this owner that coming in saying, well, we should make it high density. And yet you've got residents that are around it saying, we don't want that, and it's kind of this tug of war, like whose property rights are we trying to respect here? Are we respecting the owner of it, but they're not going to be the owner, it's going to be the developer, or are we respecting the residents that are living around it that are going to be affected by this and their property rights? So it's definitely a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you understand, that's the developer's property when they bought it. But if they're planning on just getting rid of it, then it's not really, it seems like it's in this gray area. It's not really their property. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, wow. So how do you feel that the impact that you're able to have, the influence that you're able to have on the other council members to kind of go in a different direction than it seems like they have been? And then how can, people in Lehi, or just in general, people be able to be better heard by their city councils? Because it seems like whether it's the legislature, whether it's Congress, whether it's your city council, almost sometimes the city council seems to be more deaf than the other levels of government at times.
Right. And, I love that you say that, because at the end of the day, the most impact that residents can have is actually on the city level. It's not, we do vote for our president of the United States, but the most impact that they will see is on the city level.
The city council has more of an impact on your day-to-day life than any other level of government.
110%. For me, one thing that I really push for people, or let's backtrack. I guess one thing with the city council members, each of us have our own personal agendas, and any of them would be lying to you if they said no, they didn't. Everyone has their own personal agenda. And so
It's like unbiased media.
exactly. There's no such thing, right? Everyone
Right.
has their own agenda. And those agendas are kind of really hard to change. And I honestly don't think I'm going to be able to sway any of the other members to see what the things that I have to say, because they're kind of set in their ways, just like I am. I'd like to think I'm a little bit more, I'd like to sway towards them, but every time there's this internal fight. And so I don't
There's
think
a principle. If it's right or wrong, you can't
right.
go to wrong just because you want to be nice to people.
Right. There's an old saying that the politician's only goal is just to get reelected,
Right.
and I have no intentions of ever running again for office. I mean, that might change later down the road, but my mentality, I'm not going to sugarcoat things to say things that you want to hear. I'm going to voice what I think is right and go with that. And so one thing I'm really encouraging residents is we have another election next year. So not this summer, but next summer, there will be another election for 2 council members and a mayor. That is their chance to vote and to do their research of who they think will best represent them for Lehi. I represent just a percentage of Lehi, as do the rest of the council members. And hopefully we can work together to come to a better understanding. But if the status quo isn't working, vote people out. Just because someone's been in there for 12 or 10 years or whatever it may be, 8 or whatever years, that doesn't mean that they're always going to be making the best choices of what Lehi needs right now or what that city needs right now. And so I just say vote, get out and vote, do your research and vote.
Are there, ways, especially in Lehi, that's where you're at, of where folks can be able to recruit people that might be a better option than what they like right now, than what's in there right now?
Yes, that's one thing I'm going to be pushing really hard next year. Social media has a really big impact. People don't realize the way that you can market with social media. I really want to encourage residents to, if you feel that little seed, if someone's planted that seed, like, hey, you should look into city council, do it. Like, just run. If you want, like Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. I say that with the city. Ask not what the city can do for you. What can you do for the city? Get out and run. That's what I did. I'm just a mom. And I don't want to say just a mom, because moms do so much, but I was a mom. I was a resident that was concerned. I want a better future for my kids. And right now, Lehi is in a molding phase, and we have an opportunity to mold that into what we want it to be, And if you feel personally that the council members aren't doing that for you, then vote someone else in, or run, be out there and run,
That's awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you joining us. Is there anything you'd like to share with folks before we sign off?
There is one thing I do want to share. I want to say, do your research, read between the lines, and try to create your own opinions off of things try to be unbiased, I guess. Don't try to take off of other people's opinions and viewpoints. What I love about your show, Ben, is that you've got, it's not right or left, it's right or wrong. Focus on that. Don't go for the political aspect of it. Try to find internally what you feel is the right decision, what's wrong, and go off of that.
Awesome. And also, so folks can, after reading a news article in the Lehi Free Press, might want to get maybe a different view. Where can folks maybe follow what you're doing as a city council?
Yes, if you follow me on my Facebook page, Katie Koivisto, Instagram, Katie for Lehi. I'm also going to be updating my website here shortly, www.katieforlehi.com. I want to be able to create more transparency for the city of what's going on with residents, keep my biased opinion out of it, and just try to get information out to the residents. That will probably be coming about towards the beginning of the summertime, end of spring. I'll have all of that, and I'll be able to post that on my social media accounts and that. But just follow me on any of those platforms, and you can stay informed.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody joining us today. If you like what we do, please consider go to defendingitutah.org and click on the membership tab and become a member today. Also, make sure and download the Defending It Utah app onto your phone. Until next time, I'm Ben McClintock from defendingutah.org.